that? Okay, we're going. Uh, I've thought about doing some different hands-on kind of stuff, and it just depends on what people want to do. I'm pretty well game to do whatever they want to do. So, uh, you know, and okay, Kevin, and how do you say your name?
Lisa.
Lisa. See, they spell them different now, and I don't know. I'm afraid to. See, I'm an old-fashioned guy, and I brought some show and tell, so we'll do some of that. I got a little outline here. Fun and Gardening Group. On Facebook, we're Fun Garden. And on YouTube, we're Fun and Garden Show. You have to put show. If you, between the funandgarden.com and Fun and Garden Show on Facebook or on YouTube, you can see all of our episodes back a whole year. We started a year ago Thanksgiving, so you can see all of our episodes, so, whatever. And the subject tonight that we're gonna, oh, wait a minute. There's no sound going. We've got to plug in here. And then I'm on a tether and I can't go anywhere. That's pretty funny. I'm glad I kind of, yeah. See, if I go any further than this, I'll fall down. So, there we go. So, Fun and Garden group is just a couple of weeks old, and so on. The first thing we're going to talk about is seed starting, because that's kind of what we should be doing right now. I wanted to show you a couple of things first. If you're going to buy any book at all for gardening, that's the Bible. Western Garden, or Sunset Gardens, the Western Garden Book. Western meaning the western part of the United States. And that is a great book. They're, I think on Amazon they're about $25. And it's got color pictures of about 10,000 plants in bloom. And it's got things about irrigation, pruning, diseases, insects, decorative gardens. It's amazing. So if you're a reader, I've read through this 2 or 3 times, and this is the one when I don't know what's going on, I get it out and look. There's some amazing plants in the world, there really are. So another little pitch I want to put in is milkweed. I just ordered these off of Amazon. I'll pass these around. There's 2 different kinds, Kathy, and I'm going to plant them this spring. The milkweed is the favorite plant and food for the monarch butterflies. So they're asking people to plant that in their yards. One of the things that's happened in the world, but in particularly the United States, is that a lot of us have gone to xeriscaping. A lot of us have taken out things because of the cost of water and so on and so forth. And a lot of things are artificial anymore. And the butterflies and the bees don't have anything to pollinate and to eat. They've gone through for 3 or 4 years now, worrying about the bees and the colony collapse and all that kind of stuff. And they found out that some of it had to do with the virus, some of it had to do with insecticides, and some of it had to do with just plain no flowers to pollinate. So, and there's different ways to pollinate, and we can, talk about that if you want to. Ants pollinate, bees pollinate, birds pollinate, But if it wasn't for bees, about 50% of our food would disappear. So, you know, if you're not going to do anything else in your garden, plant some little flowers of some sort for the bees. And, you know, but of course, in this room, we're all gardeners, so we don't have to worry about that too much. Okay, this is the time of the year to be doing seed starting. Have any of you started your seeds at home? Okay, this is a kit. This is a 36 cell kit, meaning each cell means a little plug that you grow plants. They come as large as 72. This is a burpee one, and I work for Burpee, so I'm the Burpee's regional representative in southern Utah. I merchandise their seeds and so on. But theirs is a good product. Jiffy is a good product. There's a lot of good seed starting. They're all about the same price. For the 72, you're going to pay about $16. If you get the self-watering kind, you're going to pay about $20. And the self-watering is just like this, but it's different in that it has extra little space in the bottom. So you have the outside tray, and you put in a stand, and the stand has the cells in it and so on. But underneath, there's a mat you put in, and the mat is a wicking mat. And it goes underneath the cells, and the cells have holes in the bottom for drainage. So the mat lays underneath there. When you put the top down, these holes in the bottom sit on the mat. The mat goes down the edge into the water. It wicks the water up across it, and then the dirt material, if you use the coils that come in here, they're coconut fiber. And you put them in the bottom of the cell and you water them and they swell up. They'll grab the water from the mat and water their cells. So it's self-watering. So all you have to do to grow seedlings is once a week put a cup of water in it, which is, and then it has a clear plastic top you put on to get your greenhouse effect, to get the humidity and those kind of things. Now, you can do it the old-fashioned way without the self-watering, but when you go to the store and you see that, you'll know what it is. I think Burpee's the only ones that have the self-watering. This kind of stuff you'll have at Star. Star is our friend. Star loaned me all this stuff to show you tonight. They're really a wonderful resource. They have about everything that you can imagine to one degree or another, plus they have it year-round. A lot of the big box stores have things, from about March to about August, and then it's gone. And Star has it year-round. So they bring in plants that are generally speaking successful in southern Utah. There's a couple that I disagree with that they bring in, like the Palo Verde tree that grows down in Arizona. They bring it in. They're beautiful. They have a light green trunk. Oh, they're beautiful. But they won't survive here. Bougainvillea. I love bougainvillea. They have it down on the coast. They have it down in Phoenix. I bought it. It grows really good until December, and then it's adios. So if you're going to buy those things, be aware that they're going to die. No matter, other than if you want to dig them up and take them in your house and take care of them in the winter. We just get about 5 degrees too cold here. If you go down to Overton, I used to have a client down in Overton that I would go down and do seeds for. And the Ace Hardware down there, and I talked to some of the people that came in, and Overton, you can have citrus trees. They're 75 miles away, and they're about 8 degrees warmer, and that's just enough.
Maybe
You can have the citrus and the avocados and those kind of things. So, and of course Vegas, you can have that kind of stuff. But I don't want to live in Vegas, but anyway. So, I got to put this down for a second because I got to get over here a minute. So you get your kit and you get some good medium, they call it. And that's good medium. It's actually for seed starting. And you can use the coil that comes in here. You put it in the bottom of the cell, pour a cup of water on it, and just like magic, it fills the cell. And it even has a little dimple in the top for the seed to go in. It works really well until you want to take that plant out, and put it in one of these. And when you do that, you take it out and it just falls apart all over the table. I get a tablespoon and try to take it out, carefully, and it just disintegrates. It doesn't form a plug. So I use dirt. Now, let's talk a little bit about what kind of dirt you use. Soil, I should say, not dirt. Dirt is what is in St. George native. That's dirt. Out in Bloomington, I don't know. I know Kathy lives out in Bloomington, but out in Bloomington, they had the soil tested by the Utah State University, the extension service up there. If you are interested in your soil in your yard, you can take a sample and send up there, and they'll test it, and it costs like $12, $14. And in a week or so, you'll get the results back, and it'll tell you how much alkaline it has, how much acid, how much this, how much that. The level of alkaline that you want in your soil is about the highest you want is about 2.5 on the scale of 1 to whatever. The soil in Bloomington was a 14. It has so much alkaline. I tried for the first 10 years I lived there. Every spring I would go out and I would turn the dirt over and I would put compost in it. And I'd put perlite in it. And I'd put peat moss in it. And turn it over and everything, And it's a waste of time. It really is. That's kind of what gave rise to the raised bed gardening. It really is. And I have raised beds in my yard, and I do it a little bit different, and we can talk about that, but we better get through what we're supposed to get through. All right, so the soil, you have a good soil, should have a little compost in it. Who knows what compost is? Okay, organic material. It can be leaves, it can be organic material. The stuff you put in the compost pile, the stuff anything that's organic and breaks down. And then there's, of course, different stages of organic. This last fall, was the first year that I took about a third of I have leaves that fall in the fall. The kids from my neighborhood come and pick up the leaves for me because I can't do it anymore. And they haul off about, the 39-gallon bags, they haul off about 40 bags of leaves. And I still have leaves in my yard. But this year, I got one of those vacuums that pick them up and shreds them and puts them in the bag. And I take it over and put it in my raised bed, and then I turn it in. And we'll see this spring if it really is that much better. It's important to do that in the fall, because if you do it in the spring, it's still organic material. It hasn't broke down. It's still sitting there. It's not going to do you any good. So you need to do it, in October, November time frame and not wait till March. Okay, so anyway, and does everybody know what perlite is? The little white beads. And perlite you can buy at Star, and you get a bag like this for about $12 or $14. If you go out to the brick plant out on the industrial road, does everybody know where that is? And you go in there and you ask them for perlite, they'll bring you out a bag that's about this big around and about this high, and it's $12. And there's about enough in there for about 2 years. But it's the same stuff. They use it to insulate brick walls, block walls. And the same things go into the seed. And what's neat about perlite is, number one, it holds the moisture. So we like that. Number two is it keeps the soil from compacting down. If it's got perlite in it, about 15% perlite, you can't compact it. And most vegetables, it's better if it's not compacted, especially carrots and radishes and onions. You don't want the soil packed around them tight. Okay, so perlite's our friend. So you put some perlite in some dirt and you put it in here, and you take your seed, and before you plant it, the first step is, what do you think? You've got to plan your garden. I know you hate to do this. Everybody wants to go start the seeds, and let's see, I'm going to do 40 tomatoes. I'm going to do, so many squash and so on. And I don't have a clue where I'm going to put them or how many I'm going to use. I'm suggesting you actually sit down. You don't have to use AutoCAD, but sit down and draw out your yard and kind of decide what you're going to do. My raised beds, I made them out of wood the first year. Not a good plan in St. George. Wood warps and twists, and it's a waste of money, and it's expensive. When you get the 8-10-inch wide boards that are 2 inches thick, they're expensive. So I had this idea, and I went and I buy cinder block over at Lowe's, and they're $1.18 a piece, and I get about 100 of them on my little trailer, and I bring them home, and I go out on my gravel in the backyard, and I make a garden bed that's about 3 feet wide and about 25 feet long. So I'll put the cinder block, and then I'll put another row on top. I do it double high because I don't want to get down on my knees to weed them. I want to be able to sit on the edge. And it works out really well. And then I buy one of these pieces of wrought iron about this long and put in the corners and pound it down so that it won't, fall apart. And you can do that about every 4th or 5th block on the way down, and then on the corners particularly. And they've been in it for 5 years now, so I don't think they're going to fall apart. And then I go and buy soil. I go over to, that's how cheap I am. I go over to Walmart when they come in the spring, their soil, and they have 1 cubic foot bags of topsoil for $1.69. And I buy 150 bags. And I take them home and fill up my raised bed. And then I take my sprinkling system, and I come up out of the ground and go up the block, and I go right down the middle. And about every 2 foot, I put an elbow, and I put a riser and a bubbler. Okay, that's how I do mine. You can do yours the way you want. But the nice thing about this is, if I want to change it, I can go down to the end and make it longer. I can take the side down and make it wider. I can do anything I want by just moving these blocks around and putting soil in there. And then in the spring, I usually add, now that I buy 150 bags, that's when I'm putting in the raised bed. Like this spring, I'll probably buy 50 or 60 bags, and I'll put, it kind of compresses down and sinks, and I'll probably put 7 or 8 bags in each garden. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 raised beds. And I'll probably, it'll end up being about 6 inches of soil that's new in the top. And then I put some perlite in it and some peat moss and turn it over with a hand shovel. I just turn it over. And that's what I use for my raised bed. Anyway, so we've got this ready. We've decided, we need like 10 tomato plants and okay, you planned it. Then you have to decide, okay, what varieties you're going to plant. With tomatoes, it makes a lot of difference, especially in St. George because of the heat. And I plant heirlooms. Does everybody know what the heirlooms are? The heirlooms I use are from 1800, and they've been good tomatoes ever since the 1800s. The immigrants, when they came across from Europe, and especially from the Crimean, which is the breadbasket of Europe, it's the part that Russia and them are fighting over right now. But these guys that came over, in their pocket, they had tomato seeds. They were precious enough to them that they brought their seeds with them. And heirlooms, you can take an heirloom and let it dry and take the seeds out of it and plant it next year. It's not like a hybrid. A hybrid, you can't do that. They're sterile. An heirloom, you can. So these people brought over all these amazing varieties of tomatoes. And they're bigger than most tomatoes. They taste better. The only drawback is that some of them are susceptible to some of the diseases. But we don't have a lot of those diseases because we're in a hot, dry climate. I use one called Russian Girl. I use the Black Crim, which is from the Crimean. I use Mortgage Lifter. Guess why it's called Mortgage Lifter? Because it's so productive that you can pay your mortgage with the tomatoes. That actually is where they got the name. That's true. Brandywine, the pink brandywine is considered the best tasting tomato in the world. I also plant oxheart. I don't know if you've ever heard of those. The tomato is actually the shape of an ox's heart. It is. It's the shape, not like heart, like Valentine, but the actual heart of an ox. And they're wonderful.
Do you save seeds from all of these then?
Pardon?
Do you save the seeds from all of these?
I have the seeds. If you buy a package of tomato seeds and you have 50 seeds, you've got 2 or 3 years worth, If you go onto a website called Totally Tomatoes, you can order all these kind of seeds and they'll be $4 a package.
Does Star Nursery carry any of those?
Star Nursery, the last couple of years have got in heirlooms. Their heirlooms have been, I'm trying to think which heirlooms they have. They've had Brandywine. They've had there's several they've had. I can't bring it to my mind right now.
Some of those varieties.
Yeah, but they're more. So if you're a person that grows it from seed and sort your own stuff, and I'm going to tell you how to do it successfully, because it's really hard sometimes if you don't know what you're doing, which I didn't.
What was that website again? Sorry.
Pardon?
What was the website again?
Oh, Totally Tomatoes. They have tomatoes and peppers, and that's about it. And they have maybe 400 varieties of tomatoes. They're really into tomatoes. And by the way, while you're in there, request a catalog. Because they have a great catalog, and when you get it, if you look at the front of the section, let's say the section on beans, it says bean culture, like culture, and it'll tell you all about growing beans. And tomatoes, the tomato culture. how you grow, just a general, plant them this deep, plant them this long, you should have them in this many days, spray them for this, don't spray them for and it's just a paragraph or two that'll help you as a gardener that you can refer to, because you think, well, I know that, and then a month and a half goes by and you think, now, what did I read about that now? How many days is that? A tomato is timed on how many days from when you set it out to that you get fruit. Most tomatoes are around 100 days. The 4th of July by Burpee, which they carry at Star, or you can buy the seeds from Burpee, and it's in the Burpee seed display at Star because I put it up so I know it's there. And they're a 55-day tomato. Now, I set my tomatoes out in February, and I use, and I forgot to put one in, I was going to bring to show you, a wall of water. Does everybody know what they are? Yes. They're a plastic, round plastic wall that's, I would say they're 2 feet tall. They might be only 18 inches, I'm not sure. And they're divided into cells, okay? And you'll pay about $16, $17 for 3 of them. And you put your tomato plant out in February, which is really early, it's gonna freeze. But you take a 3-gallon bucket and put it over the tomato plant. Then you put your wall of water over the bucket. And you take your hose and you fill each cell. Okay, when it's all full, you pull the bucket out and the wall of water collapses like a teepee, like this. And your tomato plant's down there. It creates a greenhouse effect. When the sun's on it, it warms the water, and then at night, the water gives off of that warmth, and it protects your tomato plants down to 15 degrees, which it never gets 15 degrees in St. George. Once 100 years, maybe. But what happens, the only problem I've had with walls of water is that my tomato plants do so well, they grow out the top. And by the 1st of May, I've got tomatoes that are out the top this far. But I also am harvesting tomatoes in June. So I beat the hot 110 degree days. And that's what you have to do down here if you want to. Okay.
I was going to ask if any of those heirlooms will.
If what?
If any of the heirlooms will create fruit during the hot time of the summer.
It's when it gets over 100 degrees, most of them quit. They, if they have fruit on them, they'll just sit there and they'll be about the size of a golf ball. And the skin gets thicker and thicker and thicker. And if you eat them, they're not much good. That's kind of one of those things from the middle of July to the end of August that we're faced with down here. You're not going to get a lot of tomatoes. Now, some people try to beat that by putting shade screen over the top of their gardens. I've got shade screen that I put over mine the last couple of years, and I can't tell that it does much, to tell you the truth, but you're welcome to try it, Okay, let's get back to this. Okay, so you've got your soil in there, and you're ready to put the seeds in. You decide you want a dozen tomato plants because you're going to put a dozen out in your garden. Okay, plant 18. Why? Because if 3 of them freeze, I don't want to have to start over again. So plant some extras. Now, how do you plant them? Okay, you take each little seed, and you've got an area that's about 1.25 inches square, and you want to put maybe 2 to 3 seeds in each little cell and push them down. I put the seeds in and then I just brush them. People that tell you to plant seeds 1 inch deep, I had a guy over in Kanab that was running a garden center over there, and he says, your seeds aren't coming up. And I said, you got to be kidding. burpee seeds germinate 96%. And I says, how deep are you telling people to plant them? And he says, just 2.5 inches. You know, a 1/4 inch, 1/4 inch if you have doubts. And if you don't know, look on the package. There's a unique idea. I've never seen one of Burpee's packages that said more than a 1/2 inch. I plant them. In fact, if I'm planting flowers, I put them in the garden. I have the dirt kind of turned over. I put them in the garden and just do that. That's all it takes. They'll go down, they'll root where they want to root, and they'll come up. But you don't put them 2.5 inches deep. Okay, you put them in here. You wet the soil down really good. You put the lid on, and you wait usually about a week to maybe a week and a half, and you'll start to see starts coming up. When the starts get, about that high, I take the clear plastic lid off. Some people try to leave it on because they think, well, greenhouse effect, this is great, but it actually damages the plant, that moisture. The plant's got to learn to live. It's a little child, and you've got to learn to live outside. Now, if all 3 seeds come up, I'm going to pull one of them and leave 2 there. And I'm going to pull one of those 2 later. But for now, I'm going to leave 2 seeds in there, 2 plants. Okay? Now, this is where the hard stuff comes in, because when you're growing seeds, they've got to have sun, light, and they have to have full spectrum light. There's a red spectrum and a blue spectrum, and they've got to have both of them. And if your house has a south-facing window that's got beautiful sunlight coming in, you're lucky. Put them right there. I don't. I have south-facing windows, but there's an awning over the back. So I don't have any of that natural sunlight. And for years I tried to do tomatoes in these, and I wasn't successful, and I'd end up going down to the nursery and buying the tomato plants. They weren't the varieties I wanted, but what was I going to do? Well, you'll start to grow these, and they'll get, an inch and a half tall. When tomatoes come through, when most plants come through, they have special leaves. The first leaves that shoot up are made to pierce the soil, okay? And they're a certain shape, but all the leaves past that, underneath those first couple of leaves, are your regular tomato leaves. And the tomato will get about 1.5 inches, and if it's not getting enough light, it starts to act like a drunk going down the street. It gets spindly, and it starts to curve over, and it gets about this high, and it's got 2 leaves on it. And the problem is light. It's not getting light. So I found, if you go to Home Depot and you buy a plant light, they have lights that are full spectrum for like reptiles and like that. They usually have a blue coating on them, which tells me that the blue spectrum and not the red spectrum. But if you buy one of those, they're usually incandescent, and the bulbs, when the bulb burns out, and considering you're supposed to leave it on about 16 hours a day, it's going to burn out. And the bulb costs as much as the fixture did to begin with, You're looking at $20 for a light bulb. I found a thing on Amazon. I love Amazon. I found a thing on there, and you plug it in, and then it's got this little controller switch, and it comes up, and it's got 4 heads on it, like a serpent. Okay? And the heads have 18-inch LED lights. So they're not going to burn out. They're LEDs. And in each tube, there's red and blue. And you can switch on the red, the blue, or both. And they're on this gooseneck affair that you can turn and move and raise and lower and bend and put them anywhere you want. And it's wonderful, and I've had them on my house plants for about a month, and my house plants are loving it. Not only that, you can do the switch in such a way that it'll come on at 8 in the morning and stay on till 10 at night and turn off, and the next day it'll do the same thing again. It's programmable, which means that if I'm in Salt Lake, my plants still have light. This miraculous contraption costs $30 at Amazon.
Do you know what it's called exactly?
It's called Miraculous Contraption. No, I don't know. I looked up plant lights, and there it was.
Okay.
And it's like the Amazon Choice or whatever.
Now, what if it's still really cold where it's going to be, though? What if it has light, but it's still basically outdoor temperatures, like a garage or something?
That's not
It would
good.
be really cold.
That's not
And
good.
it's not going to be okay.
You've got to get above 60, 65 degrees.
Oh, okay.
65 to about 80 is exactly right. And if it's cold like that, it's not going to do good. All right? So if you get light on there and you're doing good, and the leaves start to come out, and they're happy, and they look like the little plants at the nursery, the little ones. Then it's time to take them out of here and put them in here. These peat pots that are degradable, or you can use plastic, or you can use ceramic, or anything you happen to have in the yard. But you have to get a larger soil situation. So this is when I'm happy that I use this, because when I pull it out, it's a plug instead of falling apart like the coconut fiber. And you put some dirt in here, and you put the plug in, and you fill around it, and then you water it good. You still keep it inside. What I found is that works is take a tote lid, turn it over. It's got the lip on it, and you can set these on it in the window or wherever. And when you water it, if you water too much, it doesn't matter. It just holds the water, and you don't ruin your table or your whatever. Okay? So that works good. You need to get them into these, and then it'll really start to do good. Gets better, bigger and better, and so on. Now, let's say that it's about this high, and it's middle or the end of February, and you're thinking, oh, I got 3 of those walls of water. I'm going to try that. I'm going to set them out. Well, with walls of water, it's not near the problem. But if you're going to set these out in a normal situation without the walls of water, you have to harden off these plants. Do you know everybody know what harden off means?
Can guess.
Well, you got to take that lid full of these plants, and you think, okay, it's noon and it's 55 degrees. You go out and set them in the sun, leave them there for a couple hours, then you bring them in. Then the next day, you go out and you leave them there for a half hour longer, and you bring them in. Hardening them off, getting used to that temperature. Now, if the temperature is down cold, you don't put them out. If it's 40 degrees, don't put them out there. But you're trying to get that plant used to the sun, the air, everything. It's outside environment. And that takes about 2 weeks to harden them off, so that you can take them and put them in the soil in your garden, and they don't go into shock. When you put a plant in soil and it goes crazy and lays down, and that's shock. It's like a human that's been in an automobile accident. It goes into shock. And this root start they sell, B12 or whatever it is, that helps it not to go into shock. But one of the things that causes it to go into shock is too cold and not enough moisture. A seed is a living organism. And when a seed is germinating, it has to have moisture. And if you give a seed moisture and then it dries out, you forget to water it, and it dries out, that seed's dead. You can water it from the next month and it won't do any good. It's dead because it dried out. And then once a seed is a plant, then you can start, well, I'm going to do it every other day, I'm going to do it every third day, whatever. But when it's germinating into seed, that soil has got to be moist, not soaking wet, but moist. Enough so if you put your finger into it, you can feel the moisture. Okay? Let's see what else. Oh, another thing that helps when you're using one of these, and in fact when you're using these, is a heating pad. Anybody ever heard of a heating pad for plants? You probably heard one for arthritis or old people like me, you know. And it's not the same kind of pad. If you go to the Petco, they sell heating pads for reptiles, and they're rubber, and that's what you want. Or you can go on to Burpee or to any of the plant dealers and buy a heating pad, and it'll keep the temperature up like you talked about. Underneath here, it'll keep it about 70, 75 degrees, and it makes a lot of difference. Those plants just go nuts. I didn't think it'd make that much difference.
Well, now what about if there's the heating pad underneath, but it's still really cold air?
Well, that's,
air?
I don't know for sure. If you had your clear plastic top on, you'd be okay. If you take the top off, and it's a plant and not a seed, you're not okay, I think. But those heating pads really work well. Now, another thing that I wanted to mention to you, and I read this and I thought, well, that makes sense. When you water your plants, and you got your plants up a couple inches and that, warm water, never ice cold out of the tap, always warm, because you'll send them into shock if you put ice cold water. Especially this time of year, that water out of the tap is really cold. So, turn it and mix it so that it's lukewarm, and then use that water to water them. Harden off, transplant, walls of water. Okay, now let me tell you about tomato root systems. We always get back to tomatoes for some reason. Is there anybody here that doesn't try to grow tomatoes? They're great. So, okay, tomatoes an interesting plant. And you can take a tomato, let's say you go over to Star Nusery and you buy one that's 18 inches high. Now, in southern Utah, because of the heat, they tell you to plant that deep so that the root system is substantial, so that it can get moisture and grow out. A tomato's interesting. You can take that plant and clip off the bottom 6 or 8 inches of leaves. And then you can dig a trench and lay the plant down. And at the end of the trench, where the top of the plant is, have it come out of the trench, just stick up, put dirt over it, and water it. And everywhere there was a leaf, it'll grow roots. Tomatoes are the only plants that if that little junction where the leaves grow out, if it's under soil, it'll be roots instead of leaves. So you can grow a huge root system by laying the plant down, and then the part that sticks up will come up and be a normal tomato, but it'll have a huge root system. If you don't do that, at least plant it deep. Plant it, if you buy one of these and you think, well, I'm going to plant it this deep, plant it 2.5, 3 inches deeper. Okay?
And you can clip the
Yes.
off up to that.
Yeah.
Like right against the stem, or
Right against the stem. Or the stem is a good terminology, or trunk. One of the things, let's talk about pruning for just a minute. These are some pruners that I got from Star that they loaned me. I'm not going to give them back, but these are nice and sharp. You need sharp pruners. If you don't have a new one, go in your garage. I take mine every year, and I take this bolt out and I sharpen the part that cuts, and then I put them back together. The other thing they tell you to do is to take alcohol and wipe the blades off of the pruners between every plant that you prune. Never heard that one before, have you? Have you?
No.
Because if this plant has a disease and you prune it and then you prune this plant, you just gave this plant that disease. So they're telling you take a little paper cup full of alcohol out with a cotton swab and clean the blades before you go to the next plant. So honest, I didn't make that up. Let's see, tomato root systems. Okay, we're about to go into trimming, so let me have some more of my show and tell here. Okay, the pruners, we talked about that. We talked about the book. Have you seen one of these? They're on Facebook. And I thought, I gotta have one of those. And they want $20 a piece. So I go on Amazon and I put plant auger, and they're $10 a piece. So I bought it. You put your drill on here. And if you're gonna do a hole for a tomato, it just throws the dirt. Bulbs, same thing. It tells you that you should have at least an 18-volt cordless drill, or a drill that's plugged in. You don't have to worry about that. But you tighten the drill on there, and that is really a machine. That thing, and you can go like this along a garden and just create, it just stirs the soil. It's really neat for $10. I mean, it's great for planting seeds or planting plants that are already in these. Like squash and that, I plant directly into the soil. I don't start them inside. There's no reason to. But anyway. Okay, let's talk about trimming. And we're going to talk about trimming tomatoes. How many of you have ever heard of trimming tomatoes? If you listen to my radio show, you probably have. You know, I'm a really good artist. They want me to go to the university and to do some art for them, you know. Anybody ever heard of trimming tomatoes? Okay, first of all, I want to tell you the difference between a determinate tomato and an indeterminate. A determinate is a bush-type tomato. When you plant it, it's going to grow in this bush that lays on the ground. And it's going to bear fruit once. And as soon as it's through bearing, you might as well pull it out and throw it in the garbage. It's done for the year. One time. Indeterminate is a climber, an upright tomato. They call it an upright habit. Okay? I don't know how that relates to Catholic nuns. I don't know how that works. But they call it an upright habit. And that tomato, when you plant it, is going to bear all year long until it freezes. But it's not going to bear the whole plant. It's going to bear one here, one there, here, you know. And then when you pick them, there's more going to come, and it's going to bear in St. George until November. And I don't buy anything that's determinate. I'm not going to buy a plant that's going to give me 10 tomatoes and die. That's not the point of it. Okay, so let's say we got our indeterminate plant in the ground, and it's about 2 feet high, and it's doing really well, and it's, see, this would be like the end of April, 1st of May. I want to make that tomato plant stronger, and I want to make it more productive. So when you look at the tomato plant, you have branches that come off. We use that terminology, and this is the trunk, okay? You have branches that come off that have just leaves. no blossoms. They're just leaves. And they're never going to have blossoms. God has determined that they're just going to sit there and have leaves. And then you look at another branch and it's got blossoms on the end. Okay? So the ones that have just leaves, you go back here to the trunk and you cut them off. And you get rid of them. Don't let them fall and decay around the plant. Get them out of there. You don't want to get a fungus or a mildew in there. So you want to do that to about 40% of your plant. Not total, okay? This is how they do tomatoes in England. And in England, gardening is a religion, man. I mean, they are serious gardeners. And I'm watching this show on the internet, and this guy has got a tomato plant 20 feet tall. And it's got a trunk this big around. And he trims it, and it's in a greenhouse, and it's been there for 5 years, giving him tomatoes. I mean, you know, that's serious gardening. And he's the one that, you know, said, trim them. Okay, if you trim them, here's what's going to happen. Number one, you're going to open the plant to air and sunlight. Because if a plant gets dense and it's just got leaves and, you know, real compact, that's not good. You want the air to be able to go through, and you want the sunlight to be able to get on those leaves and branches that have blossoms. The next thing it's going to do, this plant has a goal in life, and his goal is to be the tallest plant in the world. Okay, he doesn't give a crap about a tomato. I care about the tomato. If I cut those limbs off, when there's a tomato, all the strength is going to go into that tomato, and that's going to make that tomato bigger and healthier and taste better. It's going to be the very best tomato that plant can grow. When I first went out and trimmed my tomatoes, my wife almost fainted. She says, you killed everything. I had a stack of tomato branches this high next to my raised bed garden. And I said, they look better, don't they, you know? And she thought I destroyed them. Well, in 2 weeks, here were all these tomatoes. I had an aunt that used to live down in Temecula. Any of you know where Temecula is? And I was down there, we stopped to visit her, and she says, Woody, you do gardening? I said, yeah, I do gardening. She says, well, I got this pepper tree out there. And she says, it's just the mangiest thing. And I looked at it, I said, that really is mangy. I said, have you got some clippers? And she says, yeah. So she's talking to my wife, visiting. I'm out there trimming this tree. And I get through and I go in and she's crying. She says, you've ruined my tree. She says, you've absolutely destroyed it. And I said, Dixie, that was her name, Dixie. I said, Dixie, wait till the spring before you decide. She called me the next spring. She says, I have the most beautiful pepper tree in the subdivision. Thank you. Sometimes you have to trim to make a plant do what you want it to do. And we'll talk a lot about that when we get to trees. But anyway, trim off not every one of those leaves that are just, or those branches that are just have leaves, but at least half of them. Make that plant so that it looks open and airy instead of this big glob of leaves. All right?
Is that a pretty safe rule of thumb for any, like squash and zucchini and stuff? Is that?
You can't trim squash. You can't trim zucchini. That is squash. You can't. It'll kill it.
Oh, okay.
Because they're a tubular stem, and if you cut them, it lets in the air, it lets in the insects, it lets the moisture out. You can't trim those. So anyway, do that, and then the other thing you need to do is use blossom set. Oh, I don't believe in blossom set. That was me 3 years ago. this stuff, I don't buy that crap. Well, I started to read about it. You know, it's terrible. The internet's terrible. You put in a subject and it pops up and you can actually read about it and you get educated. It's awful. And it says if your tomato is blossoming and it's not setting, you're not getting tomatoes, it's because of a lack of calcium in the soil. Now, you can cure that by, number one, putting calcium in the soil and letting the tomato draw it up. Or you can buy Blossom Set. It comes in I don't know, it's a pint, I think, with a little sprayer on over its Star for $9.95. And it is spray calcium. And you spray the blossoms. And it causes them to set. And that works on tomatoes, cucumbers, squash, almost any vegetable that you have in your garden that's blooming. You can use this Blossom Set. Or you can buy a bag of, like this, of bone meal and dig it around the plant and do your watering. Okay? Now, another thing that I learned, when you water these, number one, you don't overhead water any vegetable. You irrigate it. You don't ever get the hose out and spray your tomatoes. Not a good thing. So I told you I put a pipe down the middle of the garden and I have a bubbler. So this bubbler comes out maybe over here. The riser comes out and it's got a bubbler on it. And the pipe's along here. Well, I used to plant all my tomatoes or whatever, wherever I wanted, and then I turn the sprinklers on and we better do it for 45 minutes. I've got to wet that garden, you know. Wrong approach. Let's do it for 5 minutes, but let's plant the plant where the bubbler drips. Then you can just let it drip to a spot this big and then turn them off. And I had a water bill last year for $180 for 1 month. Just water. And water's expensive. The end of the year, I covered my side yard and my back lawn with gravel, and this spring I'm doing the front lawn. I can't afford that. And the water rates are going up. So you can put that plant right where that bubbler is. And then the other thing I do is I don't have enough zones to have a zone for this raised bed and a zone for that raised bed. It's all, you know. So I have the same zone that does the squash and the tomatoes and the cucumbers. So what I do is I bring it up out of the ground and shoot it down the raised bed. I put a shutoff, you know, a ball valve, 3/4 inch. They cost about $5. And I glue it into the pipe. And so I turn it on and I look down here and I think, okay, it's going to take 4 minutes to water the tomatoes. Now I still have to water the squash over here and it's going to take longer. So I'm going to turn this down so that when that's watered, this is watered, but not at the same rate. So I can adjust the different gardens with those shutoffs. So I have a bunch of shutoffs all over so that I can tailor it. Now, if you buy one of these that I brought to show you, you can do it with your cell phone. The new sprinkler control boxes are coming out from are Wi-Fi smart. So you can put these on the wall in your garage and terminate the water or wire in them. And then you go through an app on your cell phone and you answer about 30 questions. What's on this zone? What's on that zone? This zone's lawn. This one's trees. This one's, you know, tomatoes. Where do I live? I live in St. George and da 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 da. You answer all these questions and then